Welcome to another installment of Turn Up the AC Hot Takes with Reason on a solo edition. All social media information will be posted in the description below. We ask that you please go ahead and hit the like and subscribe while you're at it so you can be notified when the latest content is available. It's about time, but the NBA is back. Man, I've been waiting for this. The playoffs, day one was today. I just want to talk a little bit about the NBA restart, and then I'll give you my predictions as far as the Western Conference and Eastern Conference playoffs, are concerned. Going into the NBA restart, I believe teams like the Lakers, the Bucks, Clippers, and even the Raptors weren't as concerned as their win-loss record, but their main concern being everybody being healthy and having a rhythm going into the playoffs. I think those are the four best teams going into the playoffs. Every other team, I think it's important. It was important for them to win some games and move themselves in terms of matchups, and more so than the top four teams. The biggest surprise of the restart had to be Phoenix and Portland. I mean, Devin Booker was amazing. They went 8-0. Both teams played great basketball. Nobody thought Phoenix had a shot, and they still went 8-0, but fell short of the playoffs. I just wanted to point them out real quick because them boys was hooping. They really balled out, and they deserve some recognition for what they did, in the bubble. After watching a few of these games, the Lakers look completely out of sync. I'm hoping it was just LeBron waiting for the playoffs before really putting his foot on the gas. As I mentioned earlier, I wasn't too concerned with the win-loss record for the Lakers, but more so how they looked. Throughout the bubble, honestly, they looked terrible defensively. AD's he's been great, in my opinion. He's the defensive player of the year. He leads Lakers in nearly all stats, aside from assists. With that being said, the Lakers are only going as far as LeBron could lead them. But he needs AD to be exactly what he did throughout the regular season. And the Lakers have enough bench veterans, that have been there in big playoff moments and delivered, that you have to believe that the bench is going to be there when it counts. The Lakers seem to have found a rhythm, at least on the offensive side of the ball, by the end of the 8 games. Because their defense, at best, has been mediocre. I do believe the defense will improve when the playoffs begin, because if it doesn't, it can end up being a very short playoff run. The Clippers are the single biggest threat to the Lakers. They're a deep team. They have the best bench in the league. 2 best two-way players in the league in Kawhi and Paul George. As long as they have all their bodies available when the playoffs start, they could definitely beat anybody in the league. Houston Rockets could be a team that potentially ends any Battle of LA talk. They're very dangerous with how they're put together. Harden and Westbrook are unstoppable. It's unfortunate that Westbrook's going to miss a couple of games in this first round of the playoffs. It could make them and OKC be a very, very long series. If both Westbrook and Harden are healthy, I got them beating OKC and giving the Lakers a run for their money in the second round. Dallas is a very good team. Potentially could push anybody to a 7-game series. I just believe that defensively they fall short in comparison to many of the Western Conference teams. I think they're missing a piece, like a wing player who can play some defense. That's really what I think they're missing. I believe they got the worst matchup in terms of who they can beat. I don't think they match up well with the Clippers. I just think the Clippers are overall better in terms of once it comes, like, offensively, you could say they're even, but defensively, the Clippers are miles ahead of the Dallas Mavericks. That has the potential to be a very fun and long series. I also want to shout out Portland and Damian Lillard, because Damian Lillard has been the bubble MVP, putting up ridiculous numbers. channeling his inner Mamba mentality. Moving on to the East, I think most people would agree that the Bucks should get to the East Finals at least. I mean, they've been the best team the past 2 years in the East. Raptors have looked great, and they even hold a dominant win over the Lakers in the bubble. Celtics and Miami are two teams that I think could potentially knock off the Bucks or the Raptors. And yeah, man, here we go. I'm about to get into these playoff predictions. We're going to start off in the Eastern Conference with the Milwaukee Bucks and the Orlando Magic. I know Orlando is up 1-0, but I still believe Milwaukee's going to win the series in 5. I think they're going to run off the next 4 and then get a gentleman sweep over Orlando and move on to the second round. Miami and Indiana. I got Miami winning that series. I think it's going to go at least 6, maybe even 7 games. I just believe Miami is the better team, and I will edge them, and I think it's going to be a long series, potentially 6 or 7 games. Moving on to Boston and Philadelphia. I got Boston beating Philly. If Ben Simmons was available, I might have to reconsider my pick. But an injured Ben Simmons and iffy Joel Embiid, I got to go with Boston because they're a deep team. Arguably the deepest team in the East. First round with Toronto and Brooklyn. I'm going with Toronto, probably in a sweep. I might give Brooklyn 1 game. But Toronto's going to win that series in no more than 5 games. Moving on to the second round, Bucks and Miami. I got Milwaukee winning that series in 6 games. And moving on to the conference finals, Boston and Toronto in the second round. I think Boston's going to win that series. I think it's going 6 or 7 games. I just believe that Boston is the deeper team. And they have a lot of young, talented wing players that, and Jason Tatum, you know what I mean? Obviously, Jason Tatum. And losing Gordon Hayward is going to hurt them. A lot of people don't think so, but I believe that's going to hurt them a little bit because if Gordon Hayward is ever able to find that form he had in Utah before he came to Boston and got injured, they can be a very, very dangerous team. But even with all that being said, I still believe Boston's going to beat Toronto and set up a matchup with Milwaukee and Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, Eastern Conference Finals, I'm taking the upset. I think the Boston Celtics are too deep. I know they have nobody to guard Giannis, but if Tatum puts up Tatum-like numbers, Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker, if they're all on their game, I just think Boston is going to find a way to pull that out in 6 or 7 games and advance to the NBA Finals. Now we're moving on to the Western Conference playoffs, starting with the 1-8 matchup of the Lakers and Portland. Although Portland is up 1-0, I'm not shook. I still believe the Lakers are the better team. I still believe the Lakers are winning the series. I got them coming out in 6 games. I'm not concerned because Lakers lost by 7 points in Game 1 last night and shot 5 for 31 from 3. We had a lot of open looks. Sometimes they just don't fall. And I don't think that's going to happen again. At least not in Game 2. And I believe the Lakers are going to win the series in 6 games and move on to the second round. Houston and OKC. The most intriguing matchup to me. Just the history between the two. You know, they played in the playoffs a couple years already. When it was Westbrook versus CP3 and Harden. And now it's CP3 versus Westbrook and Harden. I think the series is going to go 6 games at the most. I got Houston winning the series and moving on to the second round. I just think Westbrook and Harden together is just too much for OKC. Moving on to Denver and Utah series. This series is going to be very fun. This one could be another 6 or 7 game series. The fan in me is rooting for Utah because I'm a big Jordan Clarkson fan, but I just think Denver is the better team. I expect Denver to win the series in 6 or 7 games. A couple years back, when Michael Porter Jr. was drafted, I said I think if he's able to recover from his injuries, he will be the best player out of his draft class. And what I'm seeing of him, you know, in the bubble games, and since he's getting minutes and stuff like that, is nothing to sway me away from my original thoughts of him becoming a star player potentially in this league. Moving on to the Clippers and Dallas. I got the Clippers winning that series. I believe they're the better team. I think it's going 6 or 7 games. Kawhi and PG are just going to be too much for Luka in the floor. You know what I'm saying? I think because game 1, you can't have 11 turnovers. You know what I mean? So I just think the Clippers are the better team, and they're going to come out of that series in 6 or 7 games over the Dallas Mavericks. Moving on to the second round of the playoffs, I got the Lakers in Houston, and then Denver and the Clippers. I think the Lakers are going to beat Houston. That could potentially go 6 games. Houston's very dangerous. They could potentially end any talks of an all Los Angeles Western Conference Finals. But I got the Lakers coming out on top of that series in 6 games. Moving on to the Western Conference Finals. Denver and the Clippers. Same thing. I think it's going to be a pretty good series. I got the Clippers winning this in 6 games as well. I think it's going to be the Lakers and Clippers in the Western Conference Finals. Potentially going 6 or 7 games. And there's nothing that has me convinced that the Lakers can't beat the Clippers. Because if LeBron is LeBron and AD is AD, to me, those two at their peak is better than Kawhi and PG at their peak. And I'm holding on to that. You can tell me otherwise. You can tell me all the reasons, you know, that the bench is better, which is why the Clippers are going to win, or this and that. The NBA is a star league. And in this sport, more than any other sport, superstars can sway a series. So I think our 2 best players are better than their 2 best players. And that's why I got the Lakers in 6 or 7 games. Moving on to the NBA Finals for a matchup against the Boston Celtics. I got the Lakers over the Celtics in the NBA Finals in 6 games. The Lakers are going to tie the Boston Celtics for 17 championships, winning it for Kobe in LeBron's 17th year. Lakers in 6 games. Go ahead and comment, hate, debate, whatever you want to do. We appreciate it all. Let me know in the comment section where I'm wrong. Tell me who you think is going to beat who, and who eventually is going to be your NBA champion. So until next time, this has been Reason. Turn up the AC Hot Takes with my NBA predictions for this year's playoffs. And we're out.